All right, ready to dive deep. Today we're tackling grokking.
Rocking.
Yeah, grokking. And no, I haven't fallen down a sci-fi rabbit hole.
Yeah.
The term actually comes from Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land.
Oh, okay.
It's all about this deep, like, intuitive understanding,
Hmm.
almost like absorbing knowledge till it becomes a part of you.
It's fascinating how science fiction can, like, foreshadow real-world concepts,
Right,
right?
right.
Heinlein was onto something with grokking.
Yeah.
It's definitely more than just knowing facts and figures.
So more than just having knowledge, but like merging with it.
Exactly. It's about experiencing oneness with whatever you're learning.
Whoa, that's wild. We've got some awesome material from Christopher McCore, who really digs into this.
Core, yeah.
He says grokking is about understanding the world so deeply that your soul actually creates a new one.
Hmm.
Almost like a spiritual material mashup.
Essentially, what McCore is suggesting is that we break down those walls between ourselves and, well, everything around us.
Right.
It's overcoming that feeling of separation we often experience, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think we all feel that disconnect at times. So McCore is saying grokking helps us bridge that gap.
Absolutely. But he doesn't see this as just some abstract sci-fi concept.
Okay.
He actually connects it to all sorts of traditions and practices.
Really?
Like, for example, the idea of tentacles from Carlos Castaneda's work.
Tentacles.
Yeah, where you're, reaching out with your energy and connecting with your surroundings.
Oh, wow. So there's an actual physical sensation involved.
Absolutely. Makes it feel a bit more tangible, doesn't it?
For sure.
He also mentions the Lorian tradition, which sees everything in nature as sacred. And then there are advanced Buddhist practices,
Okay.
things like Mahamudra and Dogzen, where the goal is to sort of break down the boundaries of the self.
So grokking is popping up in all these different philosophies. It's like there's this hidden thread connecting them all.
Right.
Makes you wonder, if it's so universal, how do we actually tap into it?
Well, McCore proposes a technique called soul kernel for, like, inducing grokking.
Mm.
And that's what our source material really dives into.
Okay.
It's called, specifically, Soul Kernel 9.
Soul Kernel 9.
Yeah, like the latest version of an app, right?
So each iteration adds something new, like building on what came before.
Exactly. Think of it like learning a complex musical piece.
Okay.
You start with that simple beat, and then you layer melodies and harmonies on top. But
Yeah.
before we get lost in the layers,
Yeah.
let's take a step back. If grokking is about overcoming that separation and feeling connected to the universe,
Right.
what could that actually look like in our daily lives?
That's a good question. I mean, imagine approaching problems with that sense of interconnectedness.
Right.
Instead of that feeling isolated. Maybe we'd make decisions that actually consider the well-being of everyone involved.
Yeah, yeah.
Or even find creative solutions we wouldn't have seen otherwise.
It's about shifting our perspective from that me versus them to we're all in this together kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe grokking could even influence how we interact with nature, moving from exploitation to a sense of harmony and respect.
That's a powerful thought for sure. And it actually ties back to those traditions you were talking about, right?
Exactly.
The Lorian respect for nature, that Buddhist idea of dissolving the self. It all seems connected, but like, how do we actually get there?
That's where soul kernel comes in.
Okay.
The material we have actually breaks down the 9 elements of this technique, almost like a recipe for grokking.
A recipe, huh?
It can seem a bit overwhelming at first,
I bet.
but let's take it step by step, shall we?
All right, lead the way. What's the first ingredient in this recipe for deeper understanding?
Well, the foundation is the dantian.
The what?
Dantian. It's a point like 3 finger widths below your navel.
Okay.
It's considered the body's energy center in a lot of different traditions.
So we're anchoring our attention there. Then what?
Next, we tap into the pulse at the dantian. Now, in a lot of meditation techniques, you focus on the breath, right?
Right.
But here, we're actually using the pulse as what's called our meditation object.
Okay.
That thing we're focusing on to help quiet the mind.
So instead of following the breath, we're tuning into our internal rhythm. I like that.
Yeah.
What comes after we've got the dantian and the pulse down?
Now, it gets a little more symbolic. We visualize a 6-pointed star,
I want a star.
a 6-pointed star, or a hexagram, which acts as a yantra.
Wait, I thought we were talking about meditation, not astronomy. What's a yantra?
Think of a yantra like a visual mantra.
Okay.
You know how a mantra uses repeated sounds to focus the mind?
Right.
A yantra does the same thing, but with a visual image. In this case, is the 6-pointed star.
So it's like a mental picture to help us concentrate.
Exactly. And as we visualize this star, we actually move our attention around its 6 points, guided by our pulse at the dantian.
Whoa, it's like a mental dance between our internal rhythm and this symbolic star. I'm starting to see how this technique layers these different elements together. But what's the meaning behind the star itself? Why a six-pointed one?
Well, the 6-pointed star symbolizes the union of opposites, like heaven and earth, spirit and matter. It represents balance and harmony.
Makes sense, especially with how McCord connects grokking to feeling a sense of oneness with everything. But I gotta say, it's a lot to keep track of.
Oh,
The dantian, the pulse, now this star.
don't worry, it's all about gradually building that skill, just like learning that musical piece.
Okay.
And we're really just getting started. There's more to this soul kernel recipe.
Oh, there's more.
Ready for the next ingredient.
Hit me with it.
We add another layer by chanting the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum silently as we focus on those star points.
Wait, a mantra on top of everything else? It sounds like a mental juggling act.
It might seem like a lot, but again, it's about slowly developing this multi-layered awareness. You don't have to master it all at once.
Deep breaths. Okay. So far, we've got the dantian, the pulse, the star, and the mantra. What else goes into this soul kernel mix?
Next up is the atlas. You gently press your tongue to the roof of your mouth.
Now that's interesting. What's the reasoning behind that?
It's about connecting your body and head, helping energy flow more freely.
So like creating a circuit for energy to travel.
Exactly. And there's another really intriguing technique called contouring.
Contouring.
Yeah. Imagine looking at a Tibetan eye chart up close and following those edges of the design with your eyes.
Okay, I can picture that. But how does that fit into soul kernel?
Instead of a chart, you apply this contouring to everyday objects and even your own thoughts and feelings.
So if I'm looking at a tree, I trace its outline with my mind's eye.
Precisely. And you can actually do the same with your internal landscape, noticing those edges of your emotions or thoughts.
Wow, we're getting into some deep stuff here. So we're layering contouring with the star, pulse, and mantra.
You got it. And to add another layer of symbolism, we incorporate the concept of the hoop in the tree. It's a Native American symbol.
Okay.
It represents the balance between spirit and matter.
Wait, so how does that tie in with everything else?
The 6-pointed star we're visualizing actually becomes the hoop, representing that spiritual realm.
I see.
And the edges of those objects we're contouring, whether physical or mental, they become the tree, representing the material world.
So we're connecting this visual meditation to this ancient symbol of balance.
Exactly.
I'm seeing how this technique just weaves together so many different ideas. What's next in this soul kernel journey?
The final element is turning our focus inward. Instead of focusing on external objects or even our thoughts,
Okay.
we shift our attention to the one who is observing.
So like taking a step back and becoming aware of our own awareness.
Exactly. And when you do that, you might realize that the you thought you were isn't this fixed thing,
Right.
but something much more fluid and vast.
Yeah.
It's a step towards that sense of oneness that grokking is all about.
That's pretty mind-blowing. So we've got the dantian, pulse, star, mantra, atlas, contouring, hoop and tree, and turning inward. Is that everything?
Well, there is one more piece. It's the practice of thinking. My core actually calls it the auxiliary meditation practice.
Isn't thinking kind of the opposite of meditation?
Well, it's not about stopping thoughts altogether. It's about noticing them without judgment and gently guiding your attention back to the technique whenever your mind wanders.
So it's about cultivating mindfulness of our thoughts. Man, this is incredibly intricate. No wonder McCord calls this Soul Kernel 9 the complete version.
It certainly is a comprehensive technique. It blends physical sensations, visuals, sound, and mindful awareness.
Like a symphony for the soul. It does sound like a recipe for grokking, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around how all these pieces fit together to actually, make it work.
Well, let's take a closer look at how they work in harmony. Maybe we can get a better sense of how this technique might actually lead to that profound experience of grokking.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so we've broken down all the ingredients of Soul Kernel 9, but
Yeah.
I'm still a little fuzzy on how it all comes together to create this state of grokking,
It's like we've laid out all the instruments of an orchestra, but we
Yeah.
haven't actually heard them play in harmony yet.
I like that analogy. So each element of Soul Kernel is like an instrument,
Right.
but what's the conductor? What brings it all together?
Your attention.
Okay.
Your attention is the conductor.
Mhm.
The practice involves layering these elements, building focus and awareness like a crescendo.
Okay.
You begin with the dantian and the pulse, that's your grounding, then add layers of complexity like the star, the mantra, the contouring.
So it's not about doing all 9 things at once.
No, not at all.
Okay, good
It's a
stuff.
gradual process.
Hmm.
As you get comfortable with one element, you add another, and your attention, like a skilled conductor, guides you through the whole symphony.
Okay, that makes sense. But why these specific elements?
Right.
Like, why the 6-pointed star? Why not, like, a circle or a square?
Well, remember how we talked about the six-pointed star symbolizing the union of opposites? Spirit and matter, heaven and earth.
Right.
It visually represents that balance we're trying to achieve. It's not just a random shape. It's a yantra that helps us focus on this concept.
Right, it ties back to that Native American symbol McClure mentioned, the hoop and the tree.
Yeah.
The star is the hoop, the spiritual, and then the objects we're contouring as the tree, the material.
Exactly. And as you focus on the star's points, you're, aligning yourself with that principle of harmony, which is a crucial step towards grokking.
Okay, and what about the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum? What role does it play in all this?
This mantra is often associated with compassion and enlightenment.
Right.
Chanting it internally while visualizing the star isn't just about focusing the mind, but also about infusing the practice with these qualities.
So it's not just a mental exercise. There's a deeper meaning behind it. Because like
Yes.
each element has both a practical and symbolic purpose.
Absolutely. And remember the atlas, where you touch your tongue to the roof of your mouth.
Yeah.
That's thought to help energy flow from the dantian throughout the body.
It's like closing an electrical circuit, allowing that energy to travel more freely. So we're using physical sensations to influence our internal state.
Precisely. And then we have contouring, which expands awareness beyond ourselves. By tracing the edges of objects, both external and internal, we're training our minds to see the world in a more detailed, interconnected way.
It's like sharpening our senses, noticing the subtle details we might normally miss.
Yeah, and by combining that with the star and hoop and tree symbolism, we're like literally and figuratively bridging that gap between the inner and outer worlds.
Whoa, this is also beautifully intertwined.
Yeah.
And then as if all that wasn't enough, we turn our focus inward to observe the observer.
Right.
That feels like the most abstract part of the whole thing.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
By shifting our attention to the one who's aware,
Right.
we start to question what we think we know about ourselves.
Mm.
That sense of I we cling to might start to feel less solid, less defined. It can be a truly transformative experience.
It's like realizing that you are more like a wave in the ocean than a separate drop, you know? That definitely aligns with McCore's idea of merging with the universe.
Exactly.
But with all this focus on the technique, I'm curious, are there like any real-world examples of what grokking might look like?
Well, while there's no scientific proof of grokking,
Right.
people across cultures have described experiences that sound a lot like it.
Okay.
Think of moments of profound insight,
Yeah.
sudden bursts of creativity, or that feeling of deep connection with nature that leaves you speechless.
It's like those aha moments when everything clicks, or those times when you feel completely in sync with your surroundings.
Right.
It makes me wonder if, like, we've all had glimpses of grokking without even realizing it.
It's certainly possible. The core might say those are just tastes of what's possible with dedicated practice.
Right.
But even without the grand claims of soul kernel, imagine the impact if we could all access those states more readily.
Yeah.
Think of the breakthroughs in science, art, or even conflict resolution if we approach them from a place of interconnectedness.
It's a mind-blowing idea. I can't help but feel a sense of excitement and possibility, just thinking about it.
Yeah.
This whole conversation has me feeling, I don't know, a little energized.
Perhaps you're getting a taste of that soul kernel magic. Remember, even if we never reach some ultimate state of grokking,
Right.
the journey itself can be incredibly rewarding. Each element we've discussed, whether it's focusing on the pulse or using a yantra or cultivating mindfulness, can benefit us individually.
So it's not just about achieving some far-off goal,
Yeah.
but about the personal growth and insights we gain along the way.
Exactly. Maybe McCore's right. Maybe grokking is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
And even if we never fully grasp the universe, we might discover something even more profound ourselves.
Wow, that's beautifully said. This whole deep dive has really shifted my perspective.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see soul kernel not just as a technique, but as like a metaphor for life itself. Constantly layering experiences, integrating knowledge, seeking deeper understanding.
And maybe, just maybe, that's the real purpose of this whole exploration.
Hmm.
To remind us that growth and understanding are ongoing processes.
Yeah.
And the more we're willing to open ourselves up to new ideas and practices, the more profound and meaningful our journey becomes.
And on that note, I think it's time to shift gears a bit and explore what this all means for our listeners.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about the how of grokking,
Right.
but I'm curious to delve into the why. What's the point of all this? What difference can it really make in our lives? So we've explored this intricate soul kernel technique and pondered this whole profound concept of grokking,
Right.
but I'm left kind of wondering, what does it all mean for us? Like here and now, what's the practical application of all this?
That's the big question, isn't it? If we can tap into this state of grokking, this deep understanding and interconnectedness,
Right.
it could completely change how we see ourselves, each other, the world around us.
I'm picturing like a world where empathy is just the norm. Conflicts get resolved through understanding instead of force, and we work with nature, not against it.
Yeah,
It sounds pretty utopian.
it does, but let's not get carried away with these idealistic visions of the future.
Okay.
Grokking, even if we can achieve it, it isn't some magic solution to all the world's problems.
Right.
It's a process, an ongoing journey of personal and collective evolution, really.
Right. We can't just snap our fingers and become enlightened beings overnight.
No.
It takes real effort, practice, and I think a willingness to face our own limitations.
Exactly. And even if we never fully reach that perfect state of grokking that Heinlein or McCord described,
Right.
the pursuit itself can be transformative.
Yeah.
The practices within Soul Kernel, like mindfulness, connecting with our bodies and expanding our awareness, they can have a huge impact on our well-being and relationships.
So it's not just about the destination, but like the growth and learning we experience along the way.
Precisely. The journey itself is the reward. And who knows, maybe by embracing these practices and striving for deeper understanding and connection,
Yeah.
we can create this ripple effect that positively influences the world around us.
I like that. It's a more grounded and realistic perspective, but still hopeful. We don't need to become superhuman to make a difference.
Right.
We can start with ourselves, our own practices and intentions.
And that brings us back to you, dear listener. What resonated with you most in this deep dive?
Yeah.
What questions are swirling around in your mind? Does the concept of grokking excite you?
Yeah.
Or does it feel too, I don't know, too far out there?
Right.
Are you curious about trying Soul Kernel or other, contemplative practices?
Those are great questions to ponder. And here's one more for you to chew on.
Okay.
If grokking is about merging with the universe, transcending the limits of our individual selves, what does that say about the limits of our potential? Are we capable of far more than we can even imagine?
It's a thrilling thought, isn't it?
It is.
And it's a question each of us needs to answer for ourselves, I think, through our own experiences and explorations.
Well, on that note of cosmic mystery and infinite possibility,
Yeah.
I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us as we ventured into the fascinating world of grokking and soul kernel.
And remember, dear listener, the journey doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep seeking. You might just surprise yourself with what you discover.
Until next time, keep diving deep.